Hello, Raptors Nation. Sean Davis here for the Raptors Nation, your home for everything Raptors. Little mini hiatus, little mini vacation, but we're back. We're refreshed in perfect time for some draft news. In time for the draft, we're a month away, a little less than a month now away from the NBA draft. The Raptors coaching search is heating up, and not in the good way. We're gonna break it all down for you. Joining me, as always, Luca Rosano. Luca, how you doing, man? And great to be back.
Yeah, it's been a while. Sean still is getting over the Lakers losing or getting swept in the Western Conference Finals.
Jeez,
Had to
okay,
throw that out
straight.
there. A little shot to begin the show. But yeah, no, I've been good, man. And look, I've been glued to the NBA playoffs as well. I know my team isn't in the race, but we've seen some phenomenal basketball. And I don't know. I'm gonna say it. Obviously, you want your team to be in the playoffs, but whenever you get to watch great NBA postseason basketball and you don't have the stress of having to worry about how your team is going to look in the playoffs, it feels pretty nice. So it's been nice kind of, sitting back, watching other teams and not having to stress about how the Raptors are playing since they're obviously not in the playoffs. So it's been good.
Yeah, I know this playoffs has been so fun. I think you've also been a part of this bandwagon, not the bandwagon, but the train that Heat Nuggets, if that is the matchup, is gonna be such good hoops.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be fun. Like, dude, that series, I know there's a lot of people that say, "Oh, I'm not gonna watch it." Okay, you're not a basketball fan. Because that's gonna be such a good
Exactly.
series. So yeah, now I get to just sit back and watch good basketball and not have any emotions tied in whatsoever. Although personally, not to go off on a spiral here, I would love to see Miami win. Only because I think Jimmy deserves it, and I don't think Miami has that many more chances after this
Yeah.
year. I think Denver is gonna have another shot. I don't know how many more chances Miami in this run with the Jimmy bucket Butler Heat. I don't know how many shots they're gonna have.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think, yeah, like you said, I mean, if you're a casual, you're not going to like a Nuggets Heat final, but if you're a real basketball lover, it's going to be a great final.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. Where do we want to start off at today? We got some interesting, and that's putting it very, very gently. Interesting coaching news is in
We'll
regards to the
start with that
Raptors.
because I know you want to rant a little bit about a particular head coach that could be the Raptors' next head coach. But okay, yeah, let's start there. So it's been wild because the Raptors are obviously in no rush to get a head coach, but
Which
they've
honestly I think is the wrong move. But go ahead.
and it just seems like they're giving everybody interviews at this point. I mean, next thing you know, Sean's gonna get an interview. Just a lot of stuff has been going on, but the latest, in which Sean's gonna rant pretty soon, the Raptors interviewing Steve Nash, and apparently it went really, really well. Now let's backtrack just a little bit. Before this, a name that popped up, which was very surprising, is ESPN personality JJ Redick. Huge fan of JJ's podcast. Obviously, JJ Redick played in the NBA, but no coaching experience. So, what was your initial reaction to the JJ Redick stuff? And what would your reaction be if the Raptors actually do hire Nash? Because, yeah, it said that the reports look like Nash wowed the Raptors. And obviously, there's ties there, Nash being Canadian. But
Yeah.
yeah, what would be your reaction to Nash potentially being the head coach of the Toronto Raptors?
JJ, again, big fan of his pod. I'm not as much of a pod listener as I was, to be completely honest with you, because most of the time look like as a content creator, most of the time you're creating content
Yeah,
anyway. So like I'm
exactly.
not a big pod listener anymore. Um, but one of the pods I do listen to is JJ's pod because he does do a great job. And it's noted because there's a ton of great podcasts out there, right? But personally, I don't listen to him as much. I love JJ. I don't think it makes sense. I think JJ, I don't even want to say it's like not fair, but I think JJ should probably start off as an assistant somewhere. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it'll be kind of cool to see JJ work his way up. I know he has the basketball acumen and the basketball IQ to probably manage himself well and surround himself with a great staff. But I don't think it would be a good look from an organization perspective if you hired JJ Redick. Steve Nash, on the other hand, Luca, you know how against I was with the Raptors bringing back Adrian Griffin and making him the head coach because you fired Nick Nurse It doesn't make sense to go with his right hand man. I think this is a little bit different than what happened in Phoenix, because in Phoenix, I want Phoenix to keep Kevin Young around. I want Phoenix to make Kevin Young that coach because he's a great dude, who obviously put a large hand in that big puzzle what that was the Phoenix Suns offense that is mildly successful and got the best out of a guy like Chris Paul and DeAndre, and then Book's been great. But that's different, right? Because the ownership and all that other stupid stuff. I would much rather the Raptors hire Adrian Griffin as their head coach than get Steve Nash. Because like what you said, they wowed you on what is Steve and I was a Steve Nash defender, if you will, after that run that he had in Brooklyn, that first year with Katie's toe or whatever, an inch off or whatever from going to the Eastern Conference Finals, probably beating Atlanta and then probably beating Phoenix. I think we could agree, but if Brooklyn gets by Milwaukee, they probably win the chip that
Yeah.
year. And then the next year, whatever. So I was essentially a Steve Nash supporter from the standpoint of, dude, he was a inch away from literally winning a championship.
Yeah.
I know it's the second round and nothing's guaranteed, but let's call it what it is. Spade's a spade. They win the championship that year if Katie's toes a inch back, whatever. But after what he did last year and after we did at the start of this year, no way are you a serious organization and that says, hey, look, we're going to hire Steve Nash to lead us in the future of this Toronto Raptors basketball club. You are going to stick yourself right into purgatory and join the likings of the Washington Wizards and the Portland Trailblazers, except at least the Portland Trailblazers have the third overall pick, which we're going to dive into, and the Portland Trailblazers have Damian Lillard. So why would you go Steve Nash? And I said this before we jumped on in a joking way, but I'm also kind of serious now that I think about it. Is the Raptors' job that unattractive and that bad to where Steve Nash is making such a massive impression on you, and that's the guy you want to go get? Like, dude, go get Kenny Atkinson. Go get. I'm assuming they tried to swing for the fences for Kevin Young. Go get Kevin. Go get Charles Lee, Mike Budenholzer's top assistant, right? Go get one of these other dudes. Why are we getting Steve Nash? That is, to me, like the most safe, conservative, and just settling pick in the world. Is like, no, just keep Adrian Griffin in house if that's the case.
I mean, if those are my choices, yeah, I'm going with Adrian Griffin over Steve Nash. I completely agree with the whole Nash thing. If they want to bring Nash in as an assistant coach, I'll be much more inclined to that. But to have Nash, given how you ended last season, come in as the head coach with your franchise still up in air about which direction you're going to take isn't the best move for this team. And we go back to Brooklyn. If KD has a smaller shoe size, they win the championship. Look, Steve Nash, let's call it for what it is. When he was in Brooklyn, he didn't need to do a whole ton of great coaching because he had the likes of Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving on his team. That's a situation where you get away with not having to coach great because you got great players on your team. The Toronto Raptors do not have Kyrie Irving or Kevin Durant on this roster, and they're still trying to find themselves, it seems, with the type of personnel that they're going to be putting out there. And we don't even know what this team's going to look like come next season. So to have a guy like Steve Nash come in and take the reins, I agree. I don't think it's a good decision at all. I'd much rather see the Raptors go after some other names that Sean just said. Even a guy like Monty Williams. I know probably Monty Williams is going to take a much more attractive job, a team that's closer to a title than this Raptors team is. But yeah, to bring in Nash and bank on him leading you into some sort of success, I don't think is a good move. I mean, it makes sense from the whole, yeah, he's Canadian and, Team Canada and all that. But as like a true basketball move, good basketball move for this franchise, I would much rather see Adrian Griffin if those are my choices. I would much rather see JJ Redick over Nash. That's where I'm at with this right now. Like, Nash is just a no-go for me as a head coach.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Man, I think Monty would be ideal. I think at the top of my list, I think Monty would be the guy I'd want out of this pool, either
Yeah.
Monty
Monty's
or
my guy, or Atkinson for me. Those are the 2 guys I would say in a perfect
Monty
world.
Atkinson or Kevin Young. So basically, a Monty guy, whether it's him or his top assistant or
Yeah.
Kenny Atkinson. I think that's what I'm leaning with. Um, yeah, I mean, and this
But
is what. Go ahead.
I was gonna say it is a good point too. Sorry to interrupt about what you said about like, yeah, like how unattractive of a destination are the Raptors?
No,
Like,
really.
does this like prove that yeah, the Raptors are just in a whole fiasco right now, where it's like you have this team that doesn't have a direction, that's still trying to find their true identity, and they can't find a top quality coach to come on over in Toronto to coach his team.
Yeah. Oh man. Gosh, annoying. Um, this is. I'm curious how you feel about this, Luca. I was saying earlier, that I don't want. I think it's wise for the Raptors to make a hire soon because I think personally, I think it's important to include your head coach who's going to be responsible for the on-court play almost entirely. To be, I think it's only fair that the dude that is his job is his job is on the line based off how the encore product looks. I think it's only fair that that guy gets to be somewhat involved in the roster building process. And a big part of that roster building process is the NBA draft.
Yeah.
See what his views and opinions are on this draft class, which I'm going to do my best at covering here on this channel, the Lakers channel, and the NBA front office show. So, especially the NBA front office show. Mock draft coming out Friday. So, you guys want to know who I have the Raptors picking at 13, or do I trade the pick? Because I do my mock drafts, by the way, Lucas, what I would do if I'm the GM or whatever of the entire of every NBA team. I don't like predictive mock drafts because I don't know. I think it's why it's more engaging content if you do what you would do.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I think it's only fair that you get your coach now, like before the end of the month or whatever. See what their views are. You get some more pre-draft workouts in, and then you have a clear plan heading into the draft. And we're going to dive into this now. The Raptors, there's a couple of ideas thrown around from the Athletic is one of them, from Eric, what's his name?
Korean
Eric, yeah, Kareem, I don't know.
or Korean,
Um,
Korean, yeah,
Kareem
Korean.
from the Athletic, who threw out a idea for how the Raptors offseason could go. And this is how he has the draft night going. He proposes a trade. I'm curious to see how you think about this. I don't think. Well, let me just read it off. So the Raptors, they trade Pascal Siakam and pick 13 in this year's draft to the Portland Trailblazers for Anthony Simons and Isaiah Little, the third pick in the 2023 draft, a first round pick in the 2026 draft, top 6 protected, which if it doesn't convey, he has to be top 4 protected 2027, and if that doesn't convey, top 1 protected in 2028. And if that doesn't convey, then it's 2 second rounders. Think of it as the Jakob trade is terms of how the protections work. And then Simons to Memphis. So it's a 3-team trade. Here's a better idea. So the Raptors get Nasir Little, the third pick. Portland, the top 6 protected pick that I talked about. Luke Kennard and Tyus Jones. That's what they end up with. The Blazers get Pascal Siakam in the 13th pick, and the Grizzlies get Anthony Simons. I don't think that makes sense for the Grizzlies, but I think for the Blazers and for the Raptors, I think it makes sense. Just on that trade alone, Luca, how do you feel about that specific trade?
So maybe I'm gonna be greedy here as a Raptors fan. I actually don't like that particular trade because I think if the
Ooh,
Raptors are going to trade Pascal Siakam, and I said this on my channel, but by the way, let me just start by saying this. I am a big fan of the Raptors looking into a trade where they send Pascal Siakam to Portland for that third pick. But I would much rather it be Pascal Siakam going to the Blazers and the Raptors getting that third pick, Simons and Little. So that is the trade that I was a big fan of that was proposed out there. And this, I remember I texted you, Sean, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts here on the show because I don't know you're going to say. Of course, I'm a diehard Raptors fan. Is it too much to ask for the third pick in Simons? Because I don't think it is. Listen, Simons is an incredible player, but the Raptors are going to be parting ways with Pascal Siakam, who is a proven all-star, proven all-NBA guy. I think you're going to need to get a big haul. Now, the third pick is going to end up being Scoot Henderson, who can end up being a generational talent.
Are we sure Scoot is it going 2?
And that's the curveball here. If Scoot goes 2, this throws everything up in arms, because I think you only do this if you know you're getting Scoot, because Scoot
Yeah.
is that point guard that is the
I love
perfect
Brandon
fit.
Miller, but Brandon Miller is
Yeah,
at 3. I'm not trading up for him
no,
because you already have 18,000 wings. You need a damn
exactly.
point guard.
No, that's a good point. If Brandon Miller is the guy, you don't make the trade. But if you know you're getting Scoot, you make that trade, because that's
Yeah.
exactly the type of point guard the Raptors need. You just look at Scoot Henderson, his build, his body of work, his
So,
athleticism. And if Wemby wasn't going number 1 in this draft, I think Scoot goes number 1 in any other draft. That's why I was actually surprised to see Brandon Miller as the projected number 2. And I think he's only projected to go number 2 just because of the fit, if I'm not mistaken, Sean, right? Because obviously
yeah.
Charlotte has LaMelo Ball, and it wouldn't make sense to get Scoot. Or is Brandon Miller, they're saying, a better player than Scoot? Because I don't think that's the case.
So I've done my draft evaluation. Scoot is my number 2 on my board.
Yeah,
Brandon's
same.
3, but I think the more if I'm Charlotte, I still take Scoot only because he's the better player, and I think
You
like
take the best available player,
yeah, just
usually.
offload Terry, and then you work with LaMelo, you work with Scoot, and I think LaMelo's a good enough off ball like 3-point threat to where I think you could get that pairing to work, and I think they have some nice tendencies. If you, I don't know, I think you could get that pairing to work. Is what I'm saying. I get why the Brandon Miller thing to Charlotte has some steam. I think it's enticing, but go ahead. Didn't mean to interrupt.
No, no, no. So yeah, assuming Scoot Henderson goes number 3, I think you absolutely look into that trade. I said it on Twitter, and it seemed like a lot of Raptors fans agreed with me, because all of a sudden you're looking at a future where you have Scoot Henderson, Scotty Barnes, and then you still have that
OG
13th pick. And that's the big thing too. I don't think the
and
Raptors
that
wouldn't surrender that 13th pick, nor would I want them to. And maybe, again, am I being too greedy here? But my perfect
okay.
scenario would be Siakam goes to Portland, Raptors keep their 13th pick, Raptors get the 3rd pick, Simons and Little.
Okay.
Now, as from your perspective, do you see Portland doing that? Or do you see Portland only doing it if it's for the 3rd pick and not Simon?
Um, I think if you want Simons, Little, and 3, you have to throw in 13. I think that is how it would go. But again, like if Scoot goes 2, I don't think all is lost because you could get like a Kassan Wallace from Kentucky, and maybe that still involves a trade up. But I think you have to trade up 2 spots to get him. I still think the objective on draft night needs to be get a point guard at all costs, whether that's Scoot Henderson and you trade up to 3. Again, this heavily requires Brandon Miller to go 2, and this isn't something I'm doing pre-draft. This is something I'm doing like, okay, the 2nd pick is in. Charlotte's taking Brandon Miller. Portland, let's get this trade done. But whether it's a Scoot Henderson, a Nick Smith out of Arkansas, or you want to take a Kassan Wallace, Nick Smith is a little bit towards the back half of that top 10, in my opinion. And then I think Kassan Wallace like 11 to 12 range, so maybe you have to jump up a pick or 2. But I think what we're getting at in general, I do think it makes sense to ship off of Pascal, because I think what you could accomplish in this draft is a complete reset as an organization and really go into these next 2 years as a soft rebuild and say, okay, we have Scotty, we have OG, who still fit this soft rebuild timeline. And now you got 13, and let's say you get off of Pascal, you have a top 6 pick, right? Let me see this draft order right quick. Let me pull up because what's my let me see. Number 1, okay, San Antonio, Charlotte, Portland, Houston, Detroit, Orlando, Indiana. Does Washington? Now Washington, the cap's a little bit screwed over, but like I don't know. I'm trying to find a team that makes sense. Like Dallas, like honestly, are you willing to trade Pascal to Dallas? Again, the cap gets really finicky in Dallas. Um, but I think you do try to get something done on draft night for Pascal. You get some draft capital. This is a really deep draft class. You have to get a guard in like I
Yeah.
mentioned already. You have to leave the drafts with a guard and probably another wing player, a 3-and-D wing. And then just build around that guard, Scotty, OG, I guess Jakob at this point. But I don't know. I think in 2 years, those guys can blossom. And we're looking at a Toronto Raptors team, Luca, that isn't like a team that you're saying, okay, they could win a first round. And if Scotty hits his ceiling, OG hits his ceiling as they're starting to enter their primes. You got these rookies. They're going to be in year 2, year 3 at this point. We could be talking about, Luke, if they handle this offseason correctly, in my opinion, the Raptors being championship contenders in 2-3 years. Am I off
Yeah, it
note
all
here?
depends on like the development of Scotty Barnes and if the Raptors can get a Scoot Henderson. But I agree. I think because the Raptors are in this like middle ground and they have an offseason that has so many question marks, now is the perfect time to launch this rebuild. You pull off a huge trade, send Siakam, get that third pick, get Scoot. I might be greedy, but if you're somehow able to keep the 13th pick, you can add another guard backs in the backcourt with Scoot, and all of a sudden you got Scoot, one of the guys you just mentioned that the Raptors could get 13th, and then Barnes. Then you're really cooking, and teams are going to be making a lot of phone calls for OG. So I know you have OG in this soft rebuild, but if the Raptors are able to offload OG and get some more draft capital, I think you got to consider it. I think the only true untouchable here, Sean, is Scotty Barnes, and everybody else you're listening to, you're taking phone calls on, because there are going to be a lot of teams calling the Toronto Raptors around draft night and just this offseason in general, because the Raptors are in a very precarious situation, right? They just fired their head coach and Nick Nurse. They're going to bring in a fresh new head coach. They got 3 unrestricted free agents in Van Vliet, Gary Trent Jr., Jakob Poeltl. The only one that we feel good about the Raptors bringing back and want to see bring back at this point is a Jakob Poeltl. This team is very directionless right now, and you got a guy in Pascal Siakam that if he makes All NBA next season, he's going to be eligible for the Supermax. Do you really want to throw that type of money to Pascal when he's proven he's not a number one guy? The answer is no. So instead of potentially losing Pascal for nothing, this is why Sean and I have been going on and on. You got to cash in on a big haul for Pascal now. So I'm in agreement. I think the Raptors really got to use this opportunity to go all in with this draft, make a big splash, acquire some good young pieces that you can build with Scotty. And man, if things go very, very well, yeah, the Raptors in 2 to 3 years from now with this new young core could be closer to a championship than this current group, because this current group is maxed out. They've missed the playoffs 2 of the last 3 years. They missed the play. They were out in the first round last year. We feel a certain way about Siakam and Van Vliet as a 1-2 punch. They can only go so far. The Raptors got to go in a different direction. And if the Raptors are stubborn like Portland, which, by the way, I think it's stupid that Portland is reportedly shopping the number 3 pick because they still think that they can build a championship team with Dame.
Right.
The Raptors don't want to be that type of team, because we know that Portland's been stuck in the middle for all these years. So the Raptors should not be stubborn. They should accept their losses and just go the route of offloading Siakam, get the best package for him, try hard to get that number 3 pick, and really, really reconstruct this thing this summer and enter in a new era of basketball. Like I'm ready for that. Like I'm ready for a big shift, because like on the other side of it, if the Raptors get cute and they bring it back and they think, oh, look, the Eastern
A
Conference
new
is
head
trash.
coach is gonna,
Look,
yeah.
yeah, a new coach is going to resurrect us. Look at Miami. They're an 8 seed and they're able to beat all these teams. The East is still going to be so tough. Miami was a 1 seed last year. The Bucks are going to bounce back. The Sixers, even without Harden, are still going to be a team to be
The
reckoned with. And the Celtics
Celtics.
are still scary. The Knicks even look pretty good with Jalen
Yeah.
Brunson leading the way. So
Atlanta with a full year of Quinn Snyder as the head
Atlanta.
coach. And I
So
wasn't high on Atlanta coming into the year, but I think Atlanta's another team that could be very interesting next year.
and then for as disappointing as they were in the first round, still got to mention Cleveland. Do they make a big move this
Man,
offseason?
Orlando is gonna probably take
Orlando's going to
another
take a
step.
leap.
So I think this is
This
I
is the
think
year. This is the year where they got to say,
tank, just
we,
suck.
we got to rebuild. And it
Yes.
starts at this draft. You got to start making some big changes now, because, yeah.
Like just tear again, enter a in air quotes soft rebuild. This isn't no trust the process bull crap. Just go into a soft rebuild where again you handle things right. And the reason I'm using the word soft rebuild is because you'll only be bad. I think if you handle things right this summer, I think you'll only be bad for 1 year, 2 years tops.
I
right?
think so too.
So don't, like Lucas said, don't get cute and bring back Pascal. Even if you want to bring back Pascal, the bigger mistake would be trying to pay Fred VanVleet and
No,
Gary Trent
no.
Jr.
Twitter. I already see the tweet now. If the Raptors bring back Fred VanVleet and they hire Steve Nash, I think we've lost faith in this franchise. I'm just gonna throw it out there.
So I think what we're getting at, there's two ways, maybe even a third way this could go. I think the first way this can go is that you enter a soft rebuild, and like we said, 1-2 years tops you're really bad, and then you really start to kickstart a consistent run of good Raptors basketball. The second path, which I think is actually unfortunately on the table, and it's one where they say, hey, we're going to get a new head coach. We're going to bring it back. We're going to bring Pascal back, which isn't the most annoying thing in the world. Like I said, the annoying thing would be you pay one up, if not both of Fred and Gary
Yeah.
Trent. You obviously got to pay Jakob Poeltl at this point, right? And then you run it back into what is probably going to be a loaded Eastern Conference next year. And then the third thing is the one I kind of hinted at is you just pay Pascal, but you either trade him at the deadline or you let him walk. And the let him walk part would be really frustrating.
Yeah.
But I think as Luca and myself as analysts, and I think what we're going to see the Raptors' direction go as a team, again, just tear it down and start up. Whether you want to tear it down completely to the bone and say it's Scotty, a new head coach, let's fill out a roster, or you want to go, okay, it's Scotty, it's OG, it's Jakob, and then build out the whatever you want to do. But I think the best course of action is to enter this soft rebuild now,
Now.
like Lucas said, this year where we just ran up. We didn't even mention the Pacers, right? Who has 3 first-round draft picks and can either use them again in a very deep class or trade them and get a decent player that fits that team well. Carlisle's a great coach. So in the past 10, the Pistons, who have another top, 6 pick, 5, whatever, right? So that's the only team we haven't mentioned, and we technically still did, is the Hornets. So we just ran off. Well, we didn't mention the Wizards or the Bulls because those two teams are like literally purgatory and mid. But we just ran off 13 teams, 12 teams or whatever, that all of you told me could be better than the Raptors next season. I wouldn't be surprised. So just be bad. Your pick next year is protected. It's top 6. Keep that pick and
Yeah.
be good. Like, I don't know, man.
And that's such a good point. I was ready to say that. That's another reason why you should open up this rebuild now, offload, get as many picks as you can, because even if you're bad next season, which in all likelihood, if you lose, let's just say a Van Vliet and Siakam this summer, it's okay if you're bad, because that means you get your pick if it's top 6. Because if it's not top 6 and it's 7, 8, 9, whatever, it's going to San Antonio. So if you're bad next year, you're going to get paid with that top 6. You're going to add that pick to this nucleus of a Scotty Barnes, a Scoot Henderson, for example. And then, yeah, if the Raptors are able to get another pick, keep their 13th pick, that's a pretty good young nucleus that all of a sudden the Raptors would be cooking up. And it's funny, you mentioned the Pacers. The Pacers, I think I saw a rumor that they could be interested in OG. And if they're willing to flaunt their picks around for an OG and an Obi, I think you consider that, because I think the goal is simple. You load up with as many picks as you can, and you really start to build this thing the right way around Scotty Barnes and the new head coach. And you already mentioned it, Sean. This draft in particular, if you can acquire multiple draft picks in this draft, which is going to be loaded, especially top heavy, you got to do it.
Yeah.
So, like, the blueprint is there. Like, a lot of people are starting to see the light. They're starting to see the plan. And if the Raptors somehow go the other way and they run this thing back and just neglect everything, I think it's going to be a huge missed opportunity. Like, look at San Antonio. Like, they weren't stubborn. They made the playoffs with DeJounte Murray. They could have been like, no, we're keeping DeJounte. We're going to try to go get another name and compete. No, they knew where they were headed. They completely offloaded. They traded DeJounte. They became the worst team. And literally 1 year of being terrible got them Victor Wembanyama. And now the San Antonio Spurs probably have the brightest future out of any other team other than OKC as of right now. So sometimes you just got to know when to take a step back. And yeah,
They also happen to do it in the luckiest year of all time because now they got Victor Wembanyama. But that's to your point though. Like they could have been stubborn and said, "Hey, look, let's be mid and let's run it back with DeJounte and win 40 games." No, let's be bad for 1 year. Or
yeah,
like really bad because they weren't good last year. They won like 35 games and they missed the play in or whatever. I know they made the play in as the 10th seed. My bad, but like they could have ran it back and say, "Hey, oh, we got DeJounte, we got some nice pieces. Let's get another guy in here." They said,
exactly.
"No, let's be bad for 1 year. Let's completely tear this. We're going to pay Keldon, but we're going to get rid of DeJounte. Let's tear this thing down for the most part, soft rebuild, and let's go get Wemby." I don't think they make the playoffs next year, but they're going to be a whole heck of a lot better to where it's not next year, but the year after. San Antonio's back in the Western
They're
Conference.
back. Yeah, they're back.
So, yeah, man, I think you don't want. I'm trying to think of an NFL comparison. You do not want to be. You remember how like the early to mid 2000 Dallas Cowboys were, where they were always 8-8, 9-7. You don't want to be that. You don't want to
No.
be that in the NBA, man, or in sports in general, man. Like, just be bad for a year and then go chase. I think if you do this the wrong way, you could set your franchise back 5+ years.
Yeah,
Um,
because if you continue to be stubborn like some of these other franchises, which again, I don't really agree with what Portland is coming out and said that they want to trade the third pick, like you're going to be sputtering and you're going to be sputtering for a long time. And I think San Antonio is the perfect example of a team that wasn't stubborn. They
yeah,
decided to take a step back. They were just awful for one season and it's paid huge because the Raptors were 10th, like the Spurs, right? The Spurs were a playing team. The Spurs could have
yeah.
continued to be like, oh, let's try to build. And yeah, they just would have shot themselves in the foot in the long run. So, it's
I go ahead.
and one more thing, like it's not like it's gonna be a horrendous, awful tank where it's like we're gonna see like so many seasons that are wasted. To your point, like this could probably be like a very quick turnaround, especially if Barnes takes a leap in year 3, where it's like maybe the Raptors are terrible for 1 year, which is upcoming, and then
Yeah,
after they acquire a top 6 pick to add to this team, they take an OKC jump in the second year of this soft rebuild. All of a sudden,
yeah,
you're back in business potentially by year 3 of being a very good team.
yeah. I'm very curious, and you brought this up about Portland. I don't want to turn this into a around the NBA conversation, but Portland, in my opinion, they need to sell on Dame now. Like, I
I
get
agree.
it. Dame is the one that's been saying, "Look, I want to be loyal to Portland or whatever." Dame, love you, but we're gonna retire your jersey. Top 3 Blazer of all time. You're my guy, but we gotta get because this isn't your peak value of Damian Lillard, but this is the moment in time where if you don't do something now with Damian Lillard, his value is going to start dropping because injuries are starting to become a minor concern and they keep creeping up in there. Then teams will be like, oh, well, okay, now we're only going to get 55 games to this dude or whatever. Still a high level point guard, right? But I think right now at is just about as good as you can get from a value standpoint. So I don't know. I'm curious what you think because I think if I'm Portland, I'm honestly trading Dame at and just really tear it down. That's what I do if I'm Portland. What about you?
So I'm gonna answer this question by proposing a question because I
Okay.
do agree. So let me ask you this. Okay, so what's more compelling if you're a Blazers fan next season? If
Mhm.
you have Damian Lillard and Pascal Siakam, and then whatever the roster is, like those are your two guys going into next season,
Okay.
or if you have Scoot Henderson, Simons as your backcourt, and then whatever assets you're able to get for Dame. What are you taking as a Blazers fan going into next season?
Thank God I'm not a Blazers fan.
Because that's basically what it is, right? Like you're either going to get a top tier player next to Dame or Scoot Henderson, which is a very damn good point guard to replace Dame.
Right.
Simons is still going to be there. That's a lethal backcourt. And then whatever assets you could get in
Or
a Damian Lillard
at
trade.
the very worst, it's Simons and Brandon Miller. Again, like Scoot goes 2, right?
Yeah.
At the very worst. Um, Me personally, I go the number 3 pick in Simons. And the reason why I go that route is because like Dame and Pascal or whatever it winds up being is cool. But like, who are they beating in the West? Like, they're not beating Denver.
No.
Denver's they're not beating.
Let's run it down quick. They're not beating Denver with that duo or team.
They're not beating the Lakers.
They're
next
not
year.
beating the Lakers. They're not beating Phoenix.
They're not beating the Clippers. They're not beating Dallas.
They're not beating Dallas.
I'm a lot higher on Dallas than a lot of people are. Like a lot of people think that they should like just say goodbye to Kyrie. In my opinion, I think you just bring Kyrie back, find a suitor for 10 maybe, or you just use 10. But I like Dallas next year.
I think they'll be a lot better, especially with one full season together in Dallas.
Yeah.
So I agree with that. So like we've already named what 5-6 teams that are going to be better than
Sacramento
the Blazers.
was the 3 seed. We haven't named the team with the third best player in the world, in my opinion, in Golden State. So that's 7 teams. And maybe like there's one, the Thunder, who I'm insanely high on next year. The Pelicans, who were the 1 seed for half of the season.
If Zion stays healthy, yeah, exactly. So yeah, when you put it, if you put it like that, I would much rather have like a Scoot Henderson with Simons than Dame and Pascal. Because with all respect to Pascal and Dame, they'll make the playoffs as like an 7th or 8th seed, like playing team getting in.
But 6.
But they're max 6. But I don't see them causing noise amongst.
Dude, we need to say Memphis. Come on now.
No, I think Memphis is going to take a huge drop next season, man. I think
they're going to make the playoffs still.
I don't know.
Well, I don't know. This Ja thing.
The Ja thing with his mental health, who knows where he's at. And then obviously Brooks is done. Bane. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not high on the Grizzlies anymore.
We got to see what the conclusion of this Ja thing. But my point is like, bro, okay, best case scenario, you win a playoff series. I'm not giving up the 3rd overall pick for 1 year because Pascal can dip as well.
That's another thing too, yeah.
No chance. No. If I'm a Blazers fan, give me the 3rd pick in Simons. We'll suck for a year. And Dame, love you. We're going to get our assets for you now while we can. Give me Simons. Give me the 3rd overall pick. Let's tank for 2 years, and then let's start back over. I don't know. If I'm a Blazer fan, that's what I do.
I think that's what they should do, but they probably won't because the Blazers, like I said, Raptors, don't be like the Blazers. Don't be stubborn. And there was another report that they said that they wanted to package the 3rd pick with Simons for like a small forward. So like I'm even trying who, like Brandon Ingram, like
right, like and why would New Orleans do that? Honestly,
yeah, there's nothing like I can think of.
Simons in the 3rd pick.
They said they want to package that for a wing. And then that's when Raptors fans were saying OG Anunoby, he's an elite wing. And I love OG, huge fan of his game, but I don't see the Blazers trading the
highway robbery
and Simons for that's highway robbery.
I was just about to say, like, dude,
OG's not an all-star yet. Like, let's call that. Like,
I think personally, Simons in 3 for Ingram is a bit of an overpay from Portland side.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm New Orleans, I'm just going to replace Ingram with Brandon Miller if Scoot goes 2. Or I'm going to replace Ingram with Cameron Whitmore from Bill. Like, I don't know if I'm New Orleans. Here, take Brandon Ingram. Go ahead. You're going to suck next year still.
And then there's nobody else that makes sense. Like, the Nets already said they're not trading Bridges.
The Clippers can't do anything because they'd be an idiot. Yeah. Like, Jaylen Brown? But that's honestly, if I'm Boston, I think an undersell in value.
Yeah, and you probably, if you're gonna trade Brown, you probably want some like win now guys.
Guys
perform at a high level now, right?
Because Tatum
exactly. They're in a championship window.
Yeah, so like unless you're, and again, I like BI, but I think Simons in the 3rd overall pick is a bit of an overpay. But we've gone overtime. I don't want to again turn this into around the NBA because that's what it's turned into. But again, this is what happens. We have fun conversation about trades and what could happen on draft night. But Raptors Nation, that's why you guys got to stay in the know and hit that subscribe button, ring that post notification bell as well. It's gonna be a fun time unless the Raptors hire Steve Nash and they bring back Pascal. But outside of that, outside that dark timeline, it's going to be a fun time. So you're going to want to stay in the know here. Follow me on Twitter at Sean_DAVI. Follow Luca on Twitter at Luca_Rosano or just Luca Rosano.
Luca Rosano 3.
Luca Rosano 3. There we go. Follow us on Twitter. Stay in the know with our latest content and coverage. Until next time, stay safe. We'll see you guys next time. Peace out.